Yeah, half a day and welcome back to Challenge the Status Quo. My name is Melvin Wonpat Borja. I'm the Executive Director of the Commission on Decolonization. The show is brought to you by COD and our friends over at Glimpses. Back for another round of political status conversation. And I'm excited because we got a special guest on her way to us. The one and only MAGA Haga Governor Lourdes A. Leon Guerrero is going to be joining us in the studio today. I'm pretty stoked. I didn't think she was actually going to show up, Reese. I didn't. I thought we were going to do this on the phone.
She likes to party hardy.
Yeah,
She's here.
My crew's just like, oh no, she's going to be here. I'm like, oh man, should have worn my good shirt. But
Bro,
yeah,
the wrinkles, bro.
I know, right? You should have ironed it out, man. Come on. It's we're going to be talking a little bit about the Organic Act, as you may or may not know. The 75th anniversary of the signing of the Organic Act is upon us. It actually was signed on the 1st of August. So there's going to be some cool events happening in the community in celebration, recognition of the Organic Act anniversary. And what we're trying to do, of course, like we always do, is trying to have a critical conversation about the issue in a way that is not maybe the typical discussion. You know, a lot of times when we talk about the Organic Act, most people, when you think Organic Act, you know, it's not that people are unaware of what the Organic Act is. I think it's more about what are some of the deeper implications. What does it really mean for us? How does it affect us? How does it impact us? How has it evolved over the years? So, as you know, most people know, the Organic Act of Guam is the thing that gave the act of Congress that gave the people of Guam U.S. citizenship. It's what made people in Guam U.S. citizens. Now, the real interesting thing about this is, well, there's a few interesting things, but one of them is that the Organic Act of Guam, though it makes us U.S. citizens, we're not the same kind of U.S. citizens as other citizens in the nation. And that's because we derive our citizenship by through this act of Congress, which makes us what they call statutory citizens. Being a statutory citizen is not the same as being a birthright citizen. Now, of course, if you're a resident of Guam, but you were born in the continental U.S. in one of the 50 states, then you are a birthright citizen. But if you gained your citizenship through the Organic Act of Guam, which many of us did, then you are considered a statutory citizen. Now, this is a really interesting point, I think, because there's been a lot of discussion on the federal level, especially around, you know, kind of the new administration's policies, perspectives on citizenship, status, immigration. There's been this threat, right, to statutory citizenship. Now, most of this, of course, in the context of immigration in the continental U.S. And so the questions or the critiques of statutory citizenship has really been around those who are granted citizenship as immigrants into the United States, which, of course, is a very different thing than what we're experiencing here on Guam. But nonetheless, in principle, you know, citizenship status can be revoked if you are a statutory citizen. Now, though it's very unlikely, I mean, it would be, I think, a nightmare to revoke citizenship for people in Guam. You know, it's nonetheless a realistic possibility, at least in the framework of the federal government. But the real interesting thing I think about the Organic Act is that the Organic Act is for all of its benefits and all of its shortcomings. I think it's extremely significant for the people of Guam in the sense that this was like many things that we've done in our history and that we currently do today. The effort to pass the Organic Act was a manifestation of our desire for self-government, local self-government. I think that for me, that's the most important aspect of the signing of the Organic Act. It's less about the granting of U.S. citizenship, but more so about the authorization to create a local system of government here in Guam. You know, that's what laid the foundation for the first Guam Congress or the Guam legislature, and eventually led to our ability to elect our own governor, which didn't happen until 1970, which is a crazy thing. I mean, if you think about it, like 1970 was not that long ago. So we still listen to all of those classics that were made, all that music, great music that was made in the 70s. You know, the 70s is a very memorable era. Rememberable era. It's Monday, man. It's Monday. I'm still stretching it out. It was a very memorable era, and still something that's, you know, is still part of our social memory and our social fabric, in the way that we, you know, understand who we are and where we are today. And so if you think about it in just kind of the bigger picture of things, you know, it's pretty insane to think that the people of Guam have only started electing their governor since 1970. But you know, the Organic Act was widely celebrated by people on Guam in 1950, and though it was, you know, widely celebrated and obviously very welcoming, a very welcome act. It's important to note that, you know, this was not a legitimate act of self-determination, and it could never be considered one. Hey, Reese, I just got a text. Somebody says that we're off the air.
Thank you. I'll check it.
I don't know. The power is cherry canary as far as I can tell. But we're checking it now. Thank you to my friends out there who have been tuning in and catching the show. I know we have some people on the Instagram live. We got some folks on the YouTube live stream as well. We're checking right now on the radio signal. But nonetheless, we are trudging along and continuing on this conversation. So this whole aspect of political self-determination, I think, is a very critical one. I really look at the Organic Act of Guam as unfinished business. You know, we took the first step in creating, you know, this authorization of self-government to develop a system of self-government on Guam. But you know, there's no benefit in stopping there. There's only more work to do in terms of attaining an equitable level of self-government, and that's what I think is really missing from our system currently. But before we're going to get into a bunch of that when Governor arrives in studio today, she's on her way. I did want to share some of the events that are going to be taking place in commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the Organic Act of Guam. So as you know, as I mentioned, the August 1st, 2025 will be the 75th anniversary, which will start with a flag raising on August 1st, 8 a.m. at the Adelup Courtyard in the front lawn of the office of the governor. It's going to be a celebration of all the creation of all the government agencies, which of course are only authorized by the creation of the Organic Act or the signing of the Organic Act and the creation of Government of Guam. There will be a naturalization ceremony at 9:30 at the session hall in the Guam Congress Building, the historic Guam Congress Building, which is also site of the famous Guam Congress walkout, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Followed by a flag raising at 12:45 at the Plaza de España. There will also be an opening ceremony with the governor's proclamation and presentation at 1 p.m. at the Plaza de España, followed by the Hafa Pledge at 2:30 p.m. And at 3 p.m., there will be critical conversations on the Organic Act, Ihinanauta Niget Pagud Zenagupat, which means our journey yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The critical conversations will take place from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. in the Guam Congress Building and will feature guest panelists, former Congressman Dr. Robert Underwood, Dr. Lisa Baza, and Polly Eric Forbes. The three of them will be talking a little bit about the history of the Organic Act, and then we'll be having a dialogue with the three of them shortly after. Just to let our listeners know, the station is down, but online is still live. So if you are tuned in to Instagram Live on the Guam COD page, or if you're on the Wave Facebook or the Wave YouTube, you can catch the live stream there. We are working on it, and we'll have this thing rocking and rolling real soon. I'll make an announcement once we're live again on the radio waves.
Thank you.
So.
I do have some people really quick. I have Paul and Amy Zerzin that are tuned in through our YouTube. I have actually 7 people watching. Paul says very few people are still alive who are statutory citizens. Their descendants are birthright citizens. And then Amy here says 1970s was half a century ago. Just, I guess, people kind of agreeing with that sentiment that so long ago.
Yeah, I mean, hi. Okay, we're going to take a real quick break. I think the governor is in the building, and so we're going to get all set up here. And we'll be right back with some conversation, critical conversation around the Organic Act signing and anniversary for Guam. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
At Wave 105 FM, we're more than just a station. We're your platform, your voice, your conversation. We're talking about what matters most to you today and in our future. And we want you to be part of it. Got something to say? We're listening. Different opinions? Bring them on. Let's talk, let's debate, let's connect, because every voice counts. Call or WhatsApp us at 671-922-1051. And if that line's busy, hit us up at 922-1052. This is Talk Radio for everyone. This is Wave 105 FM, the talk of Guam.
Sometimes you just need a little country in your life. Pull over on Guam's road to all country music, Route 99.5 FM. The best country music non-stop and queued up for you all day long. The latest and the greatest country music lives on Route 99.5 FM and on Route99FM.com. Tune in to Guam's only country music station, Route 99 FM.
Half a day at Wave 105 FM. We want to talk. We want to talk about the things that are important to our island and our community, and we want to talk with you. If you want to join the conversation, if you want to chime in, we welcome it. We welcome all points of view, all thoughts, all perspectives. Call or WhatsApp us at 671-922-1051. If that line is busy, then call us at 922-1052. This is Talk for Everyone. Thanks for listening to Wave 105 FM, the talk of Guam.
Think you've got what it takes to win? Tune in every Friday on Wave 105 FM with Patty Arroyo for the Hilton Trivia Challenge. Test your knowledge and you can score dinner for 2 at the Hilton Guam Resort and Spa. It's brought to you by the Hilton Guam Resort and Spa only on Wave 105 FM.
Bolt your doors, lock your windows, turn off your lights, and come with me into the Weird Darkness. I'm Darren Marlar, the host of Weird Darkness, every Thursday night from 6 to 8 here on Wave 105.1. Every week on Weird Darkness, you'll hear 2 hours of stories of the paranormal, supernatural, legends, lore, crime, conspiracy, mysterious, macabre, unsolved, and unexplained. Weird Darkness, this Thursday night at 6 on Wave 105.1. Bolt your doors, lock your windows, turn off your lights, and come with me into the Weird Darkness. I'm Darren Marlar, the host of Weird Darkness, every Thursday night from 6 to 8 here on Wave 105.1. Every week on Weird Darkness, you'll hear 2 hours of stories of the paranormal, supernatural, legends, lore, crime, conspiracy, mysterious, macabre, unsolved, and unexplained. Weird Darkness, this Thursday night at 6 on Wave 105.1.
Political status impacts almost every aspect of our lives on Guam, but many are unaware of our right to self-determination and decolonization. What does it mean and how can it improve our quality of life? Join the conversation, ask some questions, and learn more about your right to self-determination and the 3 legitimate political status options for Guam. Tune in to Challenge the Status Quo every Monday from 10 a.m. to noon on Wave 105.1 FM, presented in partnership with the Commission on Decolonization and Glimpses Media.
Hafade Guausi Pali Suba. Don't forget to catch The Bright Side every weekday afternoon from 2 to 6 on Wave 105. From big laughs to big issues, if it's happening on island, we're breaking it down with island leaders, business owners, and you. I want to send so much love to our sponsors, MicroPack, Local Jerk, GTA, Sherwin-Williams Paint, Chili's, and Subway. Take a break from all of that shade and join the bright side on Wave 105.
Jack here. My bonus Jack combo starting at $5.99 comes with fries, a drink, and a burger with 1, 2, or 3 patties. It's a meal that'll actually make you happy. Starting at $5.99. Get so much more. Welcome to Jack in the Box. Plus tax, limited time only. Price and participation may vary.
The views and opinions expressed in this show are that of the show hosts, guests, and callers. They do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the staff and management of Wave 105 FM, Glimpses Media, or any of our partners. As we strive to provide quality, respectful, and engaging content, we welcome you to participate in the conversation. Thank you for tuning in to Wave 105 FM, the sound of Guam. Enjoy the show. Guests and callers. They do not necessarily
All right, and we're back in action. I'm not sure yet if the radio signal is live, but we are live on the COD Instagram feed, as well as the Wave YouTube live online. So all the online streams are working. Thanks for tuning in with us, and I'm happy to announce that we have our guests here in studio with us. I'd like to welcome our governor, Lulian Guerrero, Magahaga of Guam. Hafa Governor. Thank you for being here with us.
Hafa day to the people who are listening and watching. Actually, I was looking forward to this.
I am too. I'm super excited. It's that we feel very grateful that you've made time in your busy schedule to sit in the studio with us. You know, I always tell people that this is an exciting time for us because we haven't had a governor that's been really, deliberate about political self-determination or determined to, push the issue. And I think it's a very fortunate thing that, you as governor have been very proactive. For those of you who are unaware, the Commission on Decolonization, by law, the governor of Guam always serves as our chair for our board. And so it's really the prerogative of the governor to convene a meeting of the Commission on Decolonization and really mobilize the commission to do the work. And we've seen in the past, when political status has not been a priority for an administration and the governor, has not made it a priority or has not convened meetings, the Commission on Decolonization can become very dormant. And I'm happy to say that we have been the farthest thing from dormant.
Right.
We've been very active.
Yeah, actually, since we took over this administration, we've been actually having meetings. Of course, there's times that we haven't had meetings because of quorum issues. Right. But even during the pandemic, we were meeting through virtual. Yep. And continued on the work of the self-determination. And I was actually a senator when the law was passed. Right. That along with Senator Hope Cristobal.
I think it's awesome.
And your mom was
there. It's awesome to
there.
see your name on that bill that created the Commission on Decolonization, and now you're our chairwoman. And I think it's a very kind of it's one of these when the stars align. You have this moment to kind of be thrust back into the work, but in a very different way, in a very different capacity. It's one of the beautiful things I think about the way that our local government operates, right, is that we run under a 3-branch system, which mirrors the U.S. system. And of course, each branch is built with their own checks and balances. They all have their own kind of power advantages and disadvantages, but that's all a part of the way that the system is built to be balanced.
Right. And actually, the work of the Commission on Decolonization is very important because one of the biggest work, of course, is community awareness and educating Right. our people about the 3 statuses that are out there for vote, but also I think strategy Right. and looking at what direction we should go to move this forward. Right. And of course, with the recent court case, or not so recent, it's been like I think 3 or 4 years Right. ago, we're actually put on hold in terms of moving out
Right.
for the vote, but we continued our work with education,
Right.
creating, of course, the guidelines and the blueprint of moving down for self-determination. But I'm still very determined that we should go out for a vote. And of course, we're working at what are our legal options to
Right.
do it. And I think we're probably more favoring and leaning towards having a nonprofit organization do the vote. And the reason for that, of course, is if we were going to sponsor it through government, according to the court case, and you know this real well, that we'd have to include everybody
Right.
that is living here in Guam, whether you're indigenous or not. And I really, truly believe that, at least this is my position, that those that are eligible to vote should be those that are indigent or native inhabitants of Guam.
Right. Well, I mean, that is supported in the Treaty of Paris, which is how we became a territory of the United States. In the Treaty of Paris, in Article 9, it reads that, quote, the civil rights and political status of the native inhabitants of the territories hereby ceded to the United States shall be determined by Congress. Now, even though that even within that statement, there's this kind of glaring hypocrisy, right? In that Congress will determine the political status, which is counterintuitive to the act of self-determination, right? The principles of self-determination is that it's supposed to be a choice made by the people who are going to be governed, that they would govern themselves. But nonetheless, I think that I think this is also part of the interesting approach, right? Or the situation, especially for you, having served in the Guam legislature and now serving in the administration. It's not at this point, it really is on the legislature to decide whether they are going to create a new law to define the eligibility for a vote. If there is still, motivation by the Guam legislature that the government facilitate the plebiscite, then we know what those parameters are handed down by the court. But I would also argue that the law that was challenged in the federal court was a law that went through the democratic process locally. Mm-hmm. There was a public hearing, there was debate on it, there was a vote on the floor. All of the opportunity for people to weigh in on that, the citizenship of Guam or citizenry of Guam was able to weigh in on whether or not they thought that law, that policy was, copacetic with them. And that law went through the process and it passed muster. The insular cases have been regularly challenged, and a lot of the Congress, the judiciary has come out and said, yes, these insular cases are clearly racist,
right.
But they still consider the insular cases good American law. And so I think about it in the same kind of principle, right? The law, yes, our law was also challenged in court, but our law also went through the process. And so, I consider our law good Guam law. And that's kind of the point of the political status debate, is that Guam clearly is not fully self-governing, right? We're still in a place where we can be challenged, we can be unilaterally controlled by the federal government, which is not a full measure of self-government. Right. And that's what I wanted the focus to be. I know that we're here to talk about the commemoration, the 75th anniversary and the commemorating of the signing of the Organic Act of Guam, which is happening this Friday. There's a whole lot of events going on in the community to celebrate this commemoration and anniversary. But our goal, of course, always with the Commission on Decolonization is to have critical discussions in the community to help people better understand what are the challenges that we face as an unincorporated territory. What is the benefit to a full measure of self-government? Right. And so I did want to talk to you about some of the events, but more so about the framework, the frame of mind, the discussions that are necessary 75 years later since 1950. Right. So this year's theme for the commemoration of the Organic Act is Lumatla y Historiate, which means history comes alive. Reflecting on this theme, how do you think the Organic Act of Guam has shaped the island's history and our current state as an island?
Well, if you go back in history and look at how we really became a U.S. Territory, it's, of course, after the Spanish-American War.
Right.
and we became like a real estate property
Right.
under the oversight of the Department of Interior. And at the time, we were under naval government rule all the way up till 1950 when we had
Right.
the Organic Act. And if you had talked to people who lived that, they would tell you that the Organic Act was really structured primarily under naval government.
Right.
And that's why, if you look at the authorities and responsibilities and power of the governor in the Organic Act, the governor is more powerful than most states
Right.
in the United States.
Right. That's because it was a naval governor at that
It
time.
was a naval governor at that time, and the naval governor had the authority. You know, of course, the naval governor reported to the president, but, you know, we're so far away, right? So the naval governor had all this freely authorized and responsible
Right.
for the governing of the of Guam, and so it was structured with that. But
Right.
it also created the three branches of government,
Right.
and it also was very general about establishing the judiciary, the executive, and of
Right.
course the legislature. But a lot of the provisions there have a lot of control by the governor.
Yeah, of course. And I think that, that's also one of the things I'm really excited about is the involvement of the Guam legislature in this commemoration. A lot of the activities around the celebration are taking place at the Guam Congress building and at the Plaza de España, which are both very symbolic of our journey. If you think about the Plaza de España, that was the seat of power for the Spanish
For a
during their
long time.
period.
And the naval government.
And the naval government. And the Guam Congress building, of course, is historic in nature in the sense that that's the building where we first started to get involved in the policy branch of government. And of course, those of you that know your Guam history recall the famous Guam Congress walkout. Now, the famous Guam Congress walkout was a protest by local elected officials who were elected by the people to be senators or be representatives in the Guam Congress, which was authorized under the Organic Act, but still under naval administration. And so when the Guam Congress representatives kind of realized that they were really just kind of placeholders, they're there just for show. They didn't feel like they had any real authority to govern in the way that they thought they were being elected to do so. They protested. And so they got up during session. They protested by walking out of a live session. And very strategically, former Senator Carlos Taitano, who was a member of the Guam Congress at the time, went immediately across the street and sent out a prepared press release. So these guys knew what they were doing. They knew that they were going to protest. This is why I love Chamorros. Chamorros are so they're so strategic. They're just over here like, all right, guys, we're going to walk out. I got the press release ready, and we're going to send it to the Associated Press. And so that's what happened. They sent the notice to the Associated Press at the time, and it ran a national story. And of course, this was kind of an embarrassment for the federal government because nobody knew that this was happening to U.S. citizens all the way over here in the Pacific. Now, mind you, this is before the internet and Facebook and instant transmittal of information. So without the strategic planning of Carlos Taitano and his contemporaries, we likely would not have had the same kind of attention on this issue that we had at that time. Now, when that happened, of course, Governor Carlton Skinner, I believe, at the time, his response was to enable the Guam Congress. And of course, as you know, 20 years later, we were able to then finally elect our own governor, which is, I think, a landmark moment for Guam. And that's one of the things that I'm also very proud of in the way that we are commemorating the Organic Act. Like we got, people, our listening audience may not know this, but we were all given instruction. All of the agency and department directors were given instruction to report to the chief of staff's office at the governor's office so that what we're doing is building out the local historical timeline on the inception of all of these government agencies. Because as we celebrate the Organic Act anniversary, and I mentioned earlier that We're going to kick off the Organic Act celebrations with a flag raising at the governor's office at 8 a.m. During that flag raising, the intent is to identify the sequential creation of all the government agencies in Guam, which I think is a really appropriate way to celebrate and commemorate the Organic Act signing, and not just this kind of generic blanket U.S. citizenship, yay, everybody happy, celebrate, 75 years ago, everything is honky-dory. You know, I like that we're taking this very critical approach, and what we're really celebrating is not so much the signing of the Organic Act and just not just the U.S. citizenship part, but we're also celebrating the desire of the people of Guam to be self-governing,
Right.
which I think is such a great thing. You know, I think
And
that
I think the Department of Administration was the first department that was
right.
established, because you had to have a agency
Yes.
that can operate and run
Right.
run the
DOA
government.
and the
Revenue and
public,
tax.
Yeah, revenue and tax and public safety.
Right.
So I know that I can't remember what it was. I think it was the Department of Public Safety, but that was the police force, the fire department, customs. They were all derived from the Department
And
of
then
Public
they
Safety.
also did the health part,
Right.
and it was public health, mental health, and GMH all under one
Right.
authority. Of course, evolution of the agencies, you know, to where it is today now, and the health department is called the health department,
Right.
public health department. Actually, it's what it was called. And of course, because each of the departments had its own authority, responsibility, and its own importance, right? So they kind of branched off.
Right.
But yeah, and we had to. I just really respect our pioneer legislators,
Right.
you know, and really some of the laws that they had established are very good laws, and it's still really very applicable
Right.
today. But you could see from the laws that they established their vision
Yes.
of what they want Guam to
Right.
be, right?
And that's the
from
way that-
customs, from, you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
I,
So
I agree, and I think that is the appropriate way to look at the history and to celebrate this anniversary, is to really understand that there were a lot of visionary leaders in Guam at that time, and all of these leaders, just like today, every leader has their own perspective, right? Their own way. This is how I think we should get to, you know, our goals. And we see what happens when there's a difference in, you know, vision. But one of the things that I've always been proud of in the leadership of Guam is that no matter our differences, even our, you know, party politics, the thing that has always remained a unified issue is local self-government and the desire to govern ourselves.
Right.
And there's always been, you know, different perspective on how to get there. There's
Right.
been different perspective on status preference. But nonetheless, you know, the people of Guam have always desired the ability to govern themselves. And that's something that I think should be a source of pride for us.
And I don't know. My dad used to tell me stories when I was little. I actually used to go with him a lot to these meetings at friends' house, right?
Right.
And they're there actually saying, "Okay, who wants to be governor? Who wants the speaker?"
That's great.
They kind of like,
Yeah.
you know, they pan it out,
Yep.
and everybody just gets on board, right? But they needed that kind of freedom, and they needed that kind of less political kind of, you know, influences,
Right.
right? But politics was very, very strong at that time.
Right.
And of course, there was the Popular Party and the Territorial Party,
Right.
which the Territorial became Republican,
Right.
and the
The
Popular
Party became the Democratic
became
Party.
the Democrat later on. But that's how they sat down and outlined the blueprint
Right.
of how we are to be governed.
Right.
And, you know, the thing with our status right now as a U.S. territory, and yes, we have had some good development and good advances in governing, right? We now, at one point, laws that we made can just be removed by Congress
Right.
without any discussions at all. And of course, that's no longer there because they recognize our lawmaking abilities now. But a lot of it had to be sort of sanctioned by Congress.
Yes, absolutely, and that's really the determining factor here, right? Yes, Guam has, the granting of U.S. citizenship. We have a modern, developed, organized local government, democratic government. It all looks and feels like full-on U.S. citizenship and full-on self-government, but the more that you understand what it means to be an unincorporated territory and what is the difference between an unincorporated territory and a state, or an unincorporated territory and an independent nation or a freely associated nation, you see that there are these clear discrepancies, there are these clear shortcomings of the territorial status. And so, I agree. I think that always should be the focus. I'm really proud of the way that the committee has approached this commemoration, in that we're not going to just say, this is just a celebration of U.S. citizenship and that's it, let's call it a day and start the party. I like that we're having a discussion about the importance of self-government.
Right. And when you hear people, of course, the activists, which I totally respect for their views and opinions, and but at the end of the day, Mel, it boils down to we have no control over our island,
right?
Basically,
Right.
And how we get that is we do our self-determination.
I agree.
Whether, like you said, whether we are state or we are a independent or a freely associated. I get very envious of small island nations.
Oh, yes.
Like Palau
Right.
and FSM and RMI, whose population is maybe 1/4 of our population.
Right.
And they have a strong voice in the United Nations.
Right.
And they control their own borders, they
Right.
control their own land, they control all of that. And that's because they became a self-governing, truly self-governing, although, they're still affiliated with the
Right.
United States, but they have more control
Oh, absolutely.
over their land, their government, their economy, and so
they have the
forth.
opportunity to engage in genuine, like real negotiation, which is a very different set of understandings than Guam deals with.
And I just want to also say that people think that if we become freely associated or independent or state, that we'll lose assistance from the federal government.
Right.
But I don't necessarily agree with that.
I don't either.
You can negotiate it.
Yes.
Just like the freely associated states are negotiating.
Right.
We
They've
can negotiate
negotiated
what
twice
we want.
already.
Yeah.
Right.
We can negotiate what we want, and we have a strong leverage here.
Right.
Because of where we are geographically located in terms of we're right here in the middle of commerce and trade
Right.
between Asia and the U.S., and our waters are very important towards that commerce and trade. Our land is very important. Where we're at is very important for the defense of the nation and defense, of course, of this region. Those are all our very strong leveraging powers, right? But we can still negotiate what we and how we want to be in close allies with the United States. But then we will have the opportunity to have close allies also with Japan, with the Philippines, with Europe, all of these people, because then they'll recognize us as an island sovereign nation.
Yes.
And we will have the help from all those people too.
Right.
So these are the things I think that need to be considered
Absolutely.
in what we are wanting to do with self-determination. And sometimes we're complacent, right, where we are right now, but really at the end of the day, we don't vote for the president.
Right.
We have a non-voting delegate, and he works hard to try and get the message through in Congress, but whoever it is, they worked hard to do that. But still, at the end of the day, we don't vote
Right, we don't
for
vote in
the
Congress.
laws and the
Right.
policies that are actually affecting us.
Right, right.
I mean, we had no. So, for example, now with this big budget bill that's going on, right? We had no say in that.
Right, we didn't get to vote in that.
We didn't get to vote on that, although, Congressman Moylan was working really hard with his colleagues there. But the colleagues are more concerned with their own constituents in the
That's
states.
their responsibility.
Right. So, like, for example, some states agree that they'll vote for it if you give me this, right? But
But we have nothing to give because
right.
we don't have the authority to negotiate that. But I think that's, and that's why when I look at
But I just want to say that although we don't have the authority to negotiate, that doesn't mean that we can't work with them to get our message across. And I think we've shown that.
Oh, absolutely.
In our administration, we work really hard with the Congress and the White House to get earned income tax credits, those kinds of things, to increase our Medicaid, FMAP for federal more to pay, and to increase our cap from like 18 million to 133 million.
That is huge.
So yes, we need to continuously work in partnership and in cooperation with the federal government, because that's what we need to do to promote the benefits and the interests of our people here. You don't just sit back and say, oh, no, you fight hard and struggle and fight hard with everybody that you can think of, whether it's the Pentagon or the White House or Congress or your federal partners, because, they are concerned about the people in Guam here, but we just don't have that governing control.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's a different thing. It's a totally different thing when you're going into a room full of colleagues versus going into a room full of empowered people and you're just kind of the guest. You're on the outside looking in. I mean, I have no experience in the halls of Congress, but I've been out to the UN to represent Guam, and I can tell you that as a representative from an unincorporated territory, it is a very challenging thing to break through, to have a discussion. We always joke, we just kind of manually do it, right? Once they convene or they go into recess or they end the session, we literally just go out onto the floor and start shaking hands and introducing ourselves. Hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm from Guam. I want to be friends. Can we meet? Can we talk about this? And it's not, I imagine that it's not that different in the halls of Congress. I mean, yes, these are colleagues, they will sit in committee together. But when you're not a voting member, there's just less motivation for a voting member to say, well, do you have something that you're going to leverage to make this work? And it's always a challenge.
We leverage the national security leverage, right? And of course, the congressmen and women and the senators, want, of course, to be able to have their protection of the nation and the region here, right? Because the Pacific is now a major attention and a major focus. And that's why there's so much money pumping into the preparedness of defense here. And so we should take advantage of that in however way we can work with them to benefit our people in infrastructure,
I always look at it as
healthcare, education, public safety, any of those. Yeah,
I agree. I think any opportunity to elevate the way where we discuss and how we discuss the fate of Guam is valuable. And Guam doesn't have the luxury of just saying, "Oh, we're going to only do this, in the halls of Congress, or we're only going to do this in the Senate, or just at the White House." We got to do it wherever we can do it. We got to make friends wherever we can make friends. I think it's always a challenge in Guam because our immediate the first stop for us is always going to be the Department of Defense. We have to start initiating discussions with Department of Defense. But the ebb and flow of the department is a very different thing than Congress. Like, for example, I've seen it firsthand. Governors who have made relationships with the sitting rear admiral, and then that rear admiral gets reassigned, and we got a new rear admiral, and we do this song and dance every so many years, and it's always a challenge. But I wanted to go back to what you were talking about with local activism and advocacy. I really look at all of our. It's so funny. We talk a lot about the the importance of advocacy and activism. But I always look at our local leaders as activists themselves. When I think about what they were doing, when I think about the first Guam Congress, that the Guam Congress walkout was a protest. Those senators were behaving like activists, and they were demanding their rights, which I think is a beautiful thing. When I look at our local government, that's what I see. I see a bunch of people who have a desire for self-government, and they're willing to strategically forge ahead and do the work. And so when I think about for example, one of the earliest petitions to the United States federal government, which dates back to 1901, the people of Guam were advocating for rights. That's what they wanted. And it wasn't until 49 years later that the Organic Act was signed. And then there was kind of this clearer path forward. But when I think about some of the things we're talking about in the creation of our local government, like you had mentioned, the Department of Health and the evolution of that, where we are now, the Department of Public Safety and where we are now, all of the government agencies have been constantly evolving. The government of Guam as a whole has been growing. And, there's always going to be a criticism out there about, our government is inefficient or it's corrupt or whatever. But every government has these issues. There's not a government on the face of the earth that doesn't have questions about its efficiency or about its integrity. This is the nature of people, of government. Yeah, their governments are institutions run by people. People are imperfect. But people also can be very intelligent and very strategic. And I think that's the more important thing that we should be focused on. There'll always be criticisms of a government institution running an island or a citizenry, and we can't avoid that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that should deter us. That shouldn't dissuade us from pursuing these goals, these values, and doing it with as much integrity as we possibly can. I don't think that the criticisms of our government should dissuade us from pursuing self-government.
No.
I don't think that that's a logical argument. Like, how are we going to run the government? Or how are we going to be freely associated? Or how are we going to be independent? Or how are we going to be a state if we can't even do X, Y, or Z? But if you look at the government of Guam today, as compared to the government of Guam in 1951, I mean, it's undeniable that Guam has really leveled up. Guam has done so many things in the last 75 years that have shown our desire, and not just our desire, but our ability. We are capable. We are fully capable of governing ourselves.
Right.
And I just don't subscribe to that argument. It's not a valid argument.
When you have even Congress people or White House people that come here and they meet with the agencies, they always come back to me and say, Governor, your people, your agency is great. They're impressed by all the work that we do. And I think for us, we take it much more serious, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we feel like we're way out here, isolated. And we try to read as much as we can to get ourselves educated in the knowledge and information. We have no shyness about working with our counterparts in the federal government, them understanding us, them knowing us. And for example, just last night I had dinner with some military leaders, right? And Congressman Mike Turner, who is with the Armed Services Committee, he's been in that committee. He knows Congresswoman Madeline Berdallo for a long time, but he's never been out here. Wow. And this is his first time. And he was impressed, totally impressed with the people here. So we need to do a lot more of that educating those federal partners, right, so they can understand more what we are saying and what we are asking for and what we want to do. Right. And that's a lot of that work is done within the agencies of our department.
Absolutely. I just want to give Shout out to all of the movers and shakers in government, people who are doing the work on the front lines, and the people who have helped to get us here. That's one of the things that I'm excited about in the celebration of the Organic Act of Guam is the recognition of these visionary leaders. There are a lot of people who are very involved in advancing and developing a modern, organized local government. And it's no small task. When you think about Guam's larger history, Guam has been a colony. Guam has been controlled by a larger nation for the last 500 years. But prior to that, there are 3,500 years of being fully self-governing and thriving here on our islands. Guam really has been the historical gem. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's amazing. I think that we don't give enough credit to that aspect, that despite the challenges, despite the adversity, the people of Guam are still here. And the Tomoto people are still insisting that we have a right to live and thrive and govern ourselves on our own island like free people, which I think is a beautiful thing.
And that doesn't mean we exclude people. We're a very inclusive
absolutely.
community. That just means, hey, we just want more say.
Right.
And the way we run things, right? And the way we control our economy, like I said, our borders and, just everything, healthcare and so forth.
Right.
But I just want to also say, Mel, that your grandfather, was the first congressman of Guam. And he was also very strategic, and he made really good friends with very key congressmen in the House of Representatives, which carried his torch for them, right? Many things.
Which was really kind of a necessary thing, right? It was a survival tactic. If you don't have a vote, you got to make friends with people who do have votes. That's really,
you might not have one vote, but you might have 20 votes.
Yeah, if you can have 20 friends, that'll be great. We're going to take a real quick break. We're at the top of the hour. We got Governor here for a little bit while longer, but she has a lot of things to do. So we're going to come back in a few minutes and wrap up this discussion. Thank you, Governor, for being here, and thanks to everyone for listening. We'll be right back.
All right, once again, a challenge to status quo here is being brought to you by friends over there, BKU Roll. Don't forget to check them out for the BK Melts. That's right, they got several different types. You can check it out at BK and Hagåtña Tuman, the Micromon, the airport.
UMFM, Dedido. The talk of Guam is Wave 105 FM.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by O'Reilly Auto Parts.
I'm Matt Piper. A trade deal between the EU and the U.S. ahead of what would have been a 30% tariff if not reached before Friday.
I think we both wanted to make a deal. You said something that is very important. It's going to bring us closer together. I think this deal will bring us very close together, actually. It's a partnership in a sense.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen.
It's 15% tariffs across the board, all inclusive.
CBS's Aaron Navarro.
The European Union will also purchase $750 billion worth of U.S. energy and invest $600 billion into projects in the United States.
Authorities in Michigan are looking to file terror charges against a 42-year-old man accused of carrying out a knife attack. It happened yesterday at a Walmart in Traverse City. County Sheriff Mike Shea.
Requested charges will be as follows. 1 count of terrorism, 11 counts of assault with intent to murder.
All 11 victims are expected to survive. Airdrops resume in Gaza. It comes after Israel paused some fighting so that limited aid can get into Gaza for those who remain starving. The BBC's Hugo Bashega.
Palestinians cheer as plane drops aid packages from the air over Gaza City. 25 tons of supplies dropped by planes from Jordan and the United Arab Emirates. A desperate measure to alleviate a growing hunger crisis, but not enough to solve it. 10 people were injured by falling boxes, according to local health officials.
The Federal Reserve is set to meet this week with a possible announcement on interest rates expected on Wednesday. It comes as President Trump has been saying he wants to get rid of Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Trump's Director of Management and Budget, Russell Vought, on Face the Nation on how he sees Powell.
He kept saying that inflation was transitory. He didn't tackle the problem. And now he's, again, too late. And you marry that with fiscal mismanagement at the Fed. It's a huge problem that we're trying to raise the country's awareness level with.
A 3-day strike is about to wrap up for concession workers at Boston's Fenway Park.
It's the last day, for now, of a 3-day walkout.
We're just looking for them to pay us the same as they pay the same job at their other ballparks.
Another pressing issue is increasing automation, which beer sellers say is replacing human workers with automatic ordering tablets.
You ask them how their day was, how was their vacation. A computer doesn't do that to you.
Aramark says there's no update on the state of bargaining, but that food sales are continuing inside the park with temp workers. Kyle Schaffel for CBS News, Boston.
The union president says they have not heard from Aramark, that is, since Friday. This is CBS News.
Think O'Reilly Auto Parts for all your car care needs. Get the parts and service you need fast from the professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
A couple years ago, I was in the bathroom at the airport when I dropped my smartphone in the toilet. Not smart. I was multitasking when I should have been focused on the job at hand. Embarrassing, but I'm not alone. According to Google, 7 million other multitaskers accidentally dropped their phones into the bowl last year. A gentle reminder that right now you can get yourself a brand new Samsung Galaxy A36 absolutely free with a $35 plan from Pure Talk. The A36 comes with scratch-resistant Gorilla Glass and a battery that'll last all day, along with unlimited talk, text, and data on America's most dependable 5G network. In other words, it's tough and smart. Something to think about next time you're multitasking in the necessary. Just dial pound 250, say keyword micro to get your free phone today. You can make the switch in just 10 minutes. That's pound 250. Say micro to switch to a no-nonsense smartphone and a company that actually stands for something. Pure Talk.
Ride shares may be costing more.
The price of rides with Uber increased about 7% nationwide last year. That's according to a study by Net Credit, which says the most expensive place to hail an Uber is in Seattle, where a 30-minute ride can cost an average of $60. Fort Worth and Indianapolis have the cheapest Uber rides at less than $30 for half an hour. In Seattle, minimum wage and other regulations, higher cost of living, and surge pricing may be contributing to the higher costs. Heather Bosch, CBS News, Seattle.
In its first weekend, the Fantastic Four, First Steps, is tops at the box office. It took in an estimated $118 million from North American theaters. Globally, it made $218 million. Second place this week went to another superhero movie, Superman, which earned $25 million in its third weekend. Jurassic World Rebirth landed in third place with $13 million in sales. Matt Piper, CBS News.
The views and opinions expressed in this show are that of the show hosts, guests, and callers. They do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the staff and management of Wave 105 FM, Glimpses Media, or any of our partners. As we strive to provide quality, respectful, and engaging content, we welcome you to participate in the conversation. Thank you for tuning in to Wave 105 FM, the sound of Guam. Enjoy the show.
Big shout out to our friends over there at Burger King for bringing you Challenge the Status Quo here on Wave 105.1 FM. In studio, of course, we have Melvin, Wonpat, Borja, our host for Challenge the Status Quo, and special guest, our governor, Leon Guerrero. Let's go ahead and get started. Big shout out to our friends over
All right, and we're back after a quick commercial break. Before we get into it, there was a question that came in from one of our online listeners. It was a question about the independent status, and if we were to become independent, how would we deal with land return? I'm summarizing the question here, but essentially, the question is rooted in the address of the Constitution and or covenant. Well, that's the way that the caller phrased it. Covenant, our only example of covenant really is the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands that uses a covenant. Their covenant basically is the equivalent it's the counterpart to our Organic Act. In the case of one of the freely associated nations, it would be their Compact of Free Association. And then, of course, for an independent nation or even a state, it would be called a constitution. States also have their own constitutions. What I think is, this is one of the things that I think is beautiful about the process, is that after an act of self-determination, which really is just expression of preference on status, right? We will choose, the people will vote and choose which status they prefer. Now, if the people were to choose independence, or anything really, if they chose free association or statehood too, then the next step would be for our community to come together. And this would not just be elected officials, right? This would have to be open, just like it is in every other historical example, is that the process, the engagement would have to be open to the entire community. Everyone would be invited to contribute to a constitutional convention, right? Which was also attempted for Guam back in, gosh, I think it was like 1970 or something like that. Yeah, in the 70s, there was an attempt at a constitutional convention. But the people of Guam rejected the constitutional convention because they wanted resolution on their political status first, which is logical. It makes sense, right? Like, what kind of constitution are you writing without knowing what your political status preference is? A state constitution is different than a compact of free association, is different than an independent nation's constitution. So at that level, that's when everybody would come together and we would determine what are kind of our universal inalienable rights, what are our values, what are the things that we want to make sure every citizen is protected from and against. And of course, that would include the consideration on land. Now, all of these things would eventually be negotiated with the federal government. And that's where I feel like is the exciting moment, right? Because all bets are off. There's no way to predict how that will or won't happen. But if we are intelligent and strategic, then I think we have a really good, we're in a good position. We have a lot to gain. Anyhow, we are just up on the 11:15 hour mark, and I know Governor has 1,000,001 important things to do as she runs this island. So I want to give the Governor a chance to give some closing remarks. First, thank you, Governor, for making time in your busy schedule to sit in the studio and have this discussion with us. I think it's important that our people hear this from your perspective. And I like to think that all of our governors, past and present and future, will have this kind of critical perspective when it comes to our rights and our history. So thank you, Governor, for being here with us. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with?
I just wanted to say thank you, Mel, also for having this time actually to have the opportunity to discuss with our people. I think we should do more of this because this is how we educate our people and, just what is self-determination. Right. Even, I think, putting it out into the elementary school, middle school, and so forth, right? Because the more our people understand and have the knowledge, the better they'll come out to make what their status is that they want to do. Right. And of course, I just want to say the Organic Act commemoration of 75 years is very crucial for us. I think it's still a living document, and I think we can always improve it. But certainly, you're right. That's the body of guidance, really, that makes us run our government the way it is. And I especially want to also thank the people of Guam for their celebration of the Organic Act. And please come out to our events and honor that. It's a document, again, that we look to guide us in our government. Right. And you're absolutely correct. Government isn't perfect. But I think if we all kind of cooperate and work with each other to make it better, then we'll have a good outcome.
I agree.
And a good government. And I always believe that Guam has demonstrated that we can govern ourselves.
Absolutely.
With integrity, honesty, transparency, accountability. We have for the last 75 years. and we
Right.
can continue to make it stronger and evolve to a much better place.
I agree. A very appropriate way to close this segment. Thank you, Governor, for being here, and thanks for your thoughts and your perspective. I definitely encourage everyone to come out and support the events, not just in celebration, but also as an opportunity to learn more. Our teams will be out there. There's a lot of folks that have been contributing to the organizing of these events, and the whole goal for this is to help people not just celebrate and commemorate this historic occasion, but also to learn more about the history of the Organic Act, where we have come from, where we intend to go, and what the possibilities are. You know, I think that it's a good perspective, Gov, that this is a living document. This is a constant evolution of our people and our system of government. And so, you know, anybody out there who is dissatisfied, it's probably a good sign for you to get involved. That's what open government is all about. Government by the people and for the people. So thank you again, Governor, for being here. And we'll be right back after a quick break. Stay tuned in to Challenge the Status Quo on Wave 105.1 FM.
Jack here. My bonus Jack combo starting at $5.99 comes with fries, a drink, and a burger with 1, 2, or 3 patties. It's a meal that'll actually make you happy. Starting at $5.99. Get so much more. Welcome to Jack in the Box. Plus tax. Limited time only. Price and participation may vary.
We're excited to announce that we're hiring for a variety of positions with some of Guam's most recognized and respected brands, including Coca-Cola, Foremost, Chili's, Glimpses of Guam, Subway, Good to Go, and Cinnabon. Whether you're just starting out or looking to take the next step in your career, there's something here for everyone. Explore current opportunities and apply today at applynowguam.com. Your next great opportunity is just a click away.
Pat's Tinting and Detailing offers premier services from complete interior cleaning and VIP detailing. And to keep you cool, Pat's also offers factory, ceramic, blacked out, and base-approved auto tinting. For more information, call 647-SLAM.
Get ready to run for something bigger than the finish line. It's the Run for Wishes. Saturday, September 13th at Leo Palace Resort. Choose your distance, 2K, 5K, 10K, or half marathon, and help grant life-changing wishes for children through the Make-A-Wish Foundation of Guam and CNMI. Every step you take brings hope. Every mile makes a difference. Early registration opens soon. Run for Wishes at Leo Palace Resort. Brought to you by Leo Palace Resort, Clutch, Glimpses Media, Protection Concepts Unlimited, and Cars Plus Guam.
Hafade Guawasi Pali Suba. Don't forget to catch The Bright Side every weekday afternoon from 2 to 6 on Wave 105. From big laughs to big issues, if it's happening on island, we're breaking it down with island leaders, business owners, and you. I want to send so much love to our sponsors, Micropack, Local Jerk, GTA, Sherwin-Williams Paint, Chili's, and Subway. Take a break from all of that shade and join the bright side on Wave 105.
Ready to turn up the savings? At GTA, you can add on a Smart Unlimited plan for just $35 a month. And, wait for it, you'll get a free Samsung Galaxy A15. That's right, a free 5G phone with a low monthly plan that keeps your wallet smiling. More savings, more data, and more TikToks in the backyard. So hurry, this deal's running out faster than your cousin's data on karaoke night. Offer available while supplies last. Terms and conditions apply. GTA, we start with you.
Hafade Guam, engage in a conversation made for the veterans of Guam with Johnny and Miss Bobby. We want to hear concerns and comments. Tune in every Wednesday for our new time, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. on Wave 105, the talk of Guam.
From uses in new, higher-performing optical, electronic, and acoustic devices to improved antennas and stealth aircraft applications, metamaterials are a special class of engineered materials designed to have properties not typically found in nature. We'll explore a new metamaterial robot that could have industry use for temperature regulation or physical information encryption in the U.S. National Science Foundation's Discovery Files.
Magnetic actuation is a non-contact system, and then makes the metamaterial or the robot extremely elegant, very light, with unique properties.
Glaucio Paulino is a professor at Princeton University whose NSF-supported lab has taken inspiration from the folding art of origami to create a new type of metamaterial robot that can expand, assume new shapes, move, and follow electromagnetic commands without physically touching the metamaterial. Potential uses for the metamaterial robot include scaling panels to be used as temperature regulation or encrypting information in a physical hacker-proof system. Future development includes combining origami forms with the tension and compression-based structural principle of tensegrity for unique, high resilience, and high strength applications.
This is a work in progress, but if the ideas that we have work, this will offer a new paradigm in structural and material design.
Learn more about this research by listening to NSF's Discovery Files podcast, Metamaterials.
The views and opinions expressed in this show are that of the show hosts, guests, and callers. They do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the staff and management of Wave 105 FM, Glimpses Media, or any of our partners. As we strive to provide quality, respectful, and engaging content, we welcome you to participate in the conversation. Thank you for tuning in to Wave 105 FM, the sound of Guam. Enjoy the show.
All right, half a day and welcome back. Thanks for tuning in with us today on this gloomy Monday morning. It's been nice nonetheless. We just wrapped our segment with Governor Leon Guerrero, who was on the air with us this morning. Really exciting. I'm really grateful. Thanks, Gov, for making time in your day to sit with us and have this discussion. We've been talking about the 75th anniversary of the Organic Act signing of Guam, for Guam. Of course, many of you know the Organic Act was the act of Congress that made the people of Guam U.S. citizens. But in the context of this show, we're applying a critical perspective to the signing of the Organic Act. It's not, we're not against the Organic Act. This is not a, hate on the Organic Act show. It's quite the opposite, really. It's more like I'm totally going off on a tangent here, but there was a press conference a couple weeks ago at the Guam Congress building, and it featured some talks from the Lieutenant Governor, the Speaker, the grandson of Carlos Saitino, Victor Lujan, and Polly Eric Forbes, Attorney Mike Phillips. And one of the things that was mentioned one of the sentiments mentioned in the press conference, I believe it was the LT, I might be wrong on this one, but somebody in there said that they referred to the Organic Act of Guam as unfinished business, which I think is a really appropriate way to think about it and to look at it. Obviously, it's easy to be critical of the Organic Act, also easy to be very just kind of blanket welcoming of the Organic Act and celebratory about it. To be fair, the people of Guam were in a very precarious position prior to 1950. During the naval era, when the governor of Guam was appointed by the Navy, right? The highest ranking naval official was just kind of automatically the governor of Guam. And our governor just mentioned earlier in the show that even after the signing of the Organic Act, the role of the governor was significant, and it was built by design. The role of the governor was super critical and was given a whole ton of control and power, because at that time the governor was not elected by the people of Guam. The governor was the naval admiral, and so it's kind of easy to see why Congress built it in this way and why they signed it in this way. Was to maintain the control of the federal government, particularly through the Navy, on Guam. But I think when you look at it in the perspective that it's unfinished business, I think that it's the appropriate way, because it helps us. It gives us an opportunity to still celebrate the victory, the major accomplishment. The Organic Act of Guam is nothing to be scoffed at. I think that it was a monumental occasion for Guam. It's really the mechanism that established the beginnings of our local government, our organized local government, and it was a necessary thing. Under the naval era, the residents of Guam, primarily the indigenous Chamorro, were not considered U.S. citizens, and so consequently their rights and their liberties were therefore not concretely defined, guaranteed, or protected. And that, that was it was obviously a tough thing to live during that time. Don't forget that during that era, the island was about 2/3 occupied by military. So 2/3 of the island was being used as military installation. Guam still had a security clearance on it. You couldn't come to Guam unless you had permission from the Department of Defense, which is why our tourism industry is so young, because it wasn't until security clearance was lifted in, I think it was the 70s, that, we were able to kind of open up the tourism industry and allow for, transit into and through Guam. A lot of the challenges that Guam has faced have been impositions that have, been inflicted by the federal government. The industry, the way that Guam could potentially evolve in various industries in ways that stimulate and develop our economy are highly dependent on our ability to make decisions for ourselves. But it's I think an exciting thing. Governor's totally hooking me up right now. She just texted me to inform me that security clearance was lifted by Governor JFK after Typhoon Karen in 1962. Thanks, Gov. Thanks for the fact checks. This is why I love Gov, because she does her homework. Thanks for doing your homework, Gov. It's important that our governor knows what she's doing. If you're governor of Guam and you don't know our history, you need to get impeached. I'm just saying. I've been in a few rooms where elected officials were clueless about our history, and I don't like that. I don't like it. Okay, so going back to the signing of the Organic Act, this is, thanks again, Gov, for the historical citation. So President JFK lifted security clearance after Typhoon Karen in 1962. That was 12 years after the signing of the Organic Act of Guam. It's if you think about what was Guam like prior to the lifting of security clearance, and what was Guam like prior to the signing of the Organic Act and granting of U.S. citizenship. It was a very difficult time for the Tomoto people to live in you're basically a people without a nation. But obviously there's a double-edged sword to this, right? Or a double-edged kind of aspect to it. In the relief that was created by the granting of U.S. citizenship, it's also the mechanism that was used to allow for eminent domain. Eminent domain is when the federal government can acquire your land, your property, for the greater good of the nation. And so, when you think about the relief that was brought to the people of Guam in the granting of U.S. citizenship, this kind of recognition and guarantee promise of the recognition and application of rights, there's also the opportunity to legitimize the taking of Tomoto land, which is tough and has lasting impact. A lot of the families that had their land taken by the federal government are unfortunately still living in dire economic situations. Being displaced from your land is not just about being displaced from the place that you call home, but it's also being disconnected from a food source or from cultural practices or even your identity. And so, there are obvious implications, I think, and it's a very complex issue. But when we look at the Organic Act as unfinished business, then I think we have the opportunity to openly celebrate, warrant the celebration of this major accomplishment, this major milestone, but also recognize that there's still more to be done, and we're still not satisfied. And I don't think we ever should be. I don't think we should ever be satisfied until we are fully self-governing. And there's a lot of self-hate discussion out there. There's no room for self-hate, guys. It is not conducive to solving this problem. But when we start pointing the finger at ourselves, like, oh, look at how inefficient we are. Look at how corrupt we are. Look at how terrible the government is. There's not a perfect government out there. And I really feel like, if you're one of these naysayers and these haters, I mean, the ballot box is open every 2 years. It's not that difficult to pick up a packet and run for senator, And even if that's not your bag, it is not that difficult to get involved in the legislative process. It's a public process. You get to hear all the bills before they hit the floor at a public hearing. That's a requirement by law. Get involved. How many people go to public hearings? How many people are aware of what's being discussed on the floor and what's being voted on? How many people engage with their elected officials? I know there are quite a number of people that do, but not nearly enough. But when I think about the principles of self-government and the principles of, an open government, right? A democratic government. The whole concept is that, the government is supposed to be by the people and for the people. We're supposed to be able to dictate what we want and what we think is appropriate and what we think is righteous and just through our elected officials, right? That's a framework in a representative democracy, is that we, as a voting populace, we elect a body of individuals, and then we authorize them to go and conduct our business on our behalf. And it's not a perfect system. And we've seen the failures of this system, not just here in Guam, but abroad and in the United States. A representative democracy is not a perfect system. But there are mechanisms built into it that allow us to hold our leaders accountable. That's what elections represent, right? Elections are supposed to be your time to say, well, I don't think you did a good job, Senator A. And Senator B, I think you did a great job, so I'm going to reelect you. Same thing with the governor every 4 years. Our governor is up for election every 4 years or reelection. And at that point, the people decide whether they think that the execution of that mission is being done properly or not. But the system is built for everybody and anybody to get involved. And I know that it's kind of contrary when we start getting into the voter eligibility discussion around a plebiscite. But even in that perspective, in that regard, if Guam was to successfully run a native inhabitant only vote, that's not the end. It's not like everybody just gets locked out at that point. The next logical step, once status is decided on, is effectuating that status and negotiating the outcome of that status. What will that status look like? And so whatever we choose, let's say that the people of Guam choose free association. We have to come to terms with the federal government on what that partnership is going to look like. The same could be said about independence. There's nothing that would prohibit the independent nation of Guam from having a continued relationship with the United States federal government. The United States federal government got relationships with independent nations all around the world. Why would Guam be any different? I think the only real kind of the real kind of different one out of the three is statehood, because statehood requires an acceptance by Congress and the Senate, right? Congress and the Senate have to approve and say, yes, we want to make Guam a state, a member of the Union. We want to give Guam, automatic voting representation in Congress and in the Senate, and representation in the electoral college that votes that elects the president. Now, if that was to happen, then obviously, we have to be equal to every other state, and we would have to develop our own state constitution, and then our state government will be subservient to the federal government, just like every other state government. So we would be sovereign within our borders, but still have recognized the superiority of the federal government and federal policy. And so, I think that it's an exciting thing. It's something that I think we should welcome and look forward to. I just wanted to get back. I know there was a question from our listening audience. We addressed it briefly, but I want to make sure that I just get this question right. Thanks, Reese, for sending it to me. So one of our callers or our listeners sent in a comment or a question online, and it says, I have a question to Melvin and the governor regarding independence. How and what will the covenant and or constitution mandate on how to manage the current properties owned by the USA? To answer that question, we discussed a little bit about, what would a subsequent mandate look like, or a constitution, right? We'd have to decide. We'd have to write a constitution, depending on the status that we choose. But in regard to federal property, all of that will be negotiated. And there are a number of different ways that it could be resolved. The most likely route is that if there is an agreement on return of federal controlled properties to the people of Guam, it will likely be facilitated through the government of Guam. So the federal government, could or would return the land to the government of Guam, and then the government of Guam would determine how that land is going to be dealt with, whether it'll be returned to the original landowners, if original landowners will be compensated, either being bought out or given another parcel in return to replace what they lost. There's a number of different ways to do that, but it would ultimately hinge on our ability to negotiate those terms with the federal government. But I think Gov made a great point, that Guam has, by default, because of our geography, we're in a very, kind of high pressure, high visibility situation, right? High priority situation. And so Guam has a lot kind of going for her in regard to leverage. So, we'd have to use that intelligently in negotiations with the federal government. There was another question from our online audience. Question was hypothetical when Tomorus voted for independence. So what are your thoughts on how do we Tomorus handle the 1/3 of properties that is currently owned by the U.S. government? This is the same caller or same viewer. Again, I think that it would be if Guam was to choose an independent status, then the first order of business would be to draft a constitution for the independent nation of Guam. And of course, the constitution would have to be open. This is the inclusive part of the entire process, right? Is that everyone needs to get involved in effectuating and manifesting what that political status looks like for Guam. And so if we were to choose independence, then, we have to create a constitution that considers the rights and privileges of all citizens of Guam. If you're a citizen of Guam, regardless of whether you're a native inhabitant or not, the Constitution must protect you, and you must have your rights protected by that Constitution. And so we'd have to write a Constitution that reflects that. The same thing would go if we were to do a compact of free association, right? We'd have to kind of come up with the terms of what our agreement is going to be. The United States federal government has 3 compacts of free association today. One is with the Republic of the Marshall Islands, another with the Republic of Palau, and another with the Federated States of Micronesia. Each one of them is unique. Each one of them was negotiated by their electorate and the federal government, or their representatives and the federal government. And they've done this twice, right? This is the second round of compacts. The first one expired after the first 20 years, and then this most recent compact is another 20-year agreement. I think that answers our last caller's question, at least to the best of my ability. Thanks to DBH for the question. All right, we got a caller. Thanks, Reese, for letting me know. We got a caller on line 1. Hafide, you're on the air with us. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, you're talking about eminent domain. The government of Guam has taken a lot of land using eminent domain.
Sorry, say that again. Government of Guam has what?
taken land.
Taking a lot of
using
land
eminent
using eminent domain.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So governments, any government in the world has right of eminent domain. And people in Guam have lost their land to the government of Guam because government of Guam has taken land using eminent domain.
Okay.
And you talk about, I've seen so many houses in Guam abandoned. The people died, but they didn't leave a will. And the children cannot agree on what to do with the house, and it becomes abandoned and an eyesore and useless. Now, my parents had 12 children, and they left a will. When they died, the house was to be sold at market value within 1 year, and the money divided equally among the children. Okay? So the house was not abandoned. It was bought by somebody, and other people lived in it. It did not become an eyesore. So housing is a problem in Guam, but it wouldn't be if there were not so many abandoned houses. So the idea that Chamorros have some special attachment to the land is nonsense, okay? It's nonsense. Otherwise, you wouldn't see houses abandoned and property turned back into the boonies. Angel Santos used to live down the street from me, and the house they lived in, you can't tell. It's still there, but it's completely overgrown with tang and tan because, like I said, they did not make a will. So you can't sit and act like a victim about everything. The world is very different than it was 80 years ago. The people of Guam are the people who live on Guam. And you cannot say you don't get to vote because you don't have the right ancestors. That is not allowed by the United Nations. And the governor said she envies the people who are on the Micronesian islands. Those people in Micronesia are moving to Guam because we live better on Guam than they do on their self-governing island. So your show is absolutely ridiculous.
Why are you listening to this show, man?
I'm going to go ahead and just kindly cut you off. If you think it really is ridiculous, you want to thank you so much for your opinion, though, and what you believe. But if you're going to come on here to talk on the show and then call it ridiculous, I don't think that's cool. So thanks so much, sir. We, again, appreciate your voice. And, I'm glad that we're able to serve a platform here.
I don't think it's ridiculous to say that Chamorros have a connection to land. I don't understand what that has to do with a probate dispute.
I know. I don't think that has anything to do with it. And again, I'm glad that we're able to provide a platform for everyone to speak their opinion. But I think it's ridiculous that you would do that.
Well,
you know what? It's okay. Everyone I think has their own ideas about Guahan. And you know what? I'm really okay with that because I know that I believe, you believe, Melvin, and all of our people believe that, sure, we're not so different from everywhere around the world, but we have our own culture, our own people, our own land, and that makes it more magical. I don't need magic rising from the grounds to make it magical, sir. I really believe that our islands and everyone around us, the Micronesian islands, are so powerful and so magical, and I'm sorry that you're not able to see the magic in that. That kind of hurt me there a little bit, but that's what these things are for, right? It's to get us talking, get us moving, get us thinking about these kinds of things, because there are always going to be people who feel this way towards a lot of things, not just Chamorro people. Can I just say it's probably something with everyone else too?
Well, I think that it's kind of beside the point. The point here is that the people of Guam desire a full measure of self-government, and it's undeniable. The history of Guam is undeniable. There's been a denial of the right to self-determination. There's been a clear inequity in the system of government that we use to operate, and it's unfair. There's this clear discrimination. There's a legal framework to justify the discrimination. I mean, the insular cases is in the books, man. Go look it up. Go Google that. Do yourself a favor and Google the insular cases and tell me that does not qualify as discrimination. So, I think that's the beautiful thing about what we're celebrating now in the Organic Act of Guam. I think has to focus on the desire for self-government. The people of Guam desire the ability to lead themselves and make decisions for themselves. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think that we should all welcome that. And, you know, like we mentioned earlier in the show, there's no such thing as a perfect government. You know, I'm not an elected official. I'm not a senator. I'm not the governor. But even if I was the governor, you know, I wouldn't be able to do it on my own. And so, you know, everybody has to play a role. Everybody has to get involved. I think that that's the way that we find ourselves in a more evolved state of public leadership is, you know, when there's accountability, not just for the people who are governed, but the people who are governing. I got another caller. We got Mr. Perez on line 1. Hafiday, Mr. Perez, you're on the air with us. Sorry, can I ask you to just turn your radio down just a little bit? There's an echo.
Okay, there. Is that better?
There you go. I can hear you just fine.
Hey, I would just like to ask a question and let's see what your answer is, okay?
Okay.
Now that it's election time, we got to choose the right voter. So I understand the issue is very delicate, very, very sensitive with the Chamorros and, you know, with the military and independence. It's very delicate, okay? I just would ask you, is this right? You know, I was doing my research on land condemnations back in the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you know, just follow me. If you know, the military comes in and actually, you know, do what they want. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So back then, you know, I was doing research on land condemnations, and man, I'm telling you, when somebody comes to your house and says, you know what, I'm going to buy your land for $1 a square meter, and if you don't take the deal, I'm going to condemn it.
Yeah, take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it. I mean, what are people going to do? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so my question is it a done deal already? If let's say right now, you know, that you know, when I was reading some of these U.S. attorneys back then, 1957, 50, you know, you got to understand our people back then. We just got through World War II, and then, you know, for someone to come over here and say, here's the U.S. Constitution, here is, you know, the court system, for you to shove it down their throat. And, you know, it's you have to put yourself in their shoes. Is, wow, I guess I got to accept $1, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, either that or they're going to condemn the land.
Right.
You know, whether what they're going to do at the airport or something, the national, I don't know what they're going to do. But how do you correct the injustice back then? Is it a done deal already for all these original owners and their inheritance, you know? Is it a done deal with, or let's say, you know, we're fighting for our sovereignty, we're fighting for independence, or even though we don't know what our political status is, whether, you know, anything. But that's the movement right now, and I thank you for doing that, bringing it out to the attention. Okay? So where does is it a done deal?
I don't think so. I think it's a great question. And I'm glad that you you set the historical context for this, because, you know, it is very complex. But
because you know, a lot of people don't know that.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of ignorant people say, oh, you know what, you were compensated already.
Right.
And that's the divide and conquer of the military.
Absolutely.
You know, the U.S.
It is.
You know, it's like, okay, you know, it makes our people, it creates animosity between our people.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you already got paid, shove it up, take it, and take it or leave it, move on.
Right.
But you got to understand, man, I mean, somebody comes to your house right now and says, hey, I'll buy it for 50 cents. Either you take it or I condemn it. What are you going to do?
Yeah. I mean, it was hard to, I think it's obvious that it's difficult for any landowner at that time to predict what the skyrocket rise in their property value would be come 2025, or what's economic situation their family would be in, 50, 20, 100 years later. But, I think that to answer your question, I don't think it's a done deal. I don't.
Melvin, I'm not looking at that compensation. I'm not looking at the money thing here.
Right.
Yes, it's good, but I'm just trying to say, wow, here are our people. Some of them, way back, their lands were taken, and that, of course, tomorrow you're gonna deed it to your kids, right?
Right.
Okay, so right now a lot of them are tomorrows. They don't even have one piece of soil here
Right.
because they're landless.
Right.
They're not homeless because Guams are home. They're landless,
Right.
and that's the injustice. Is wow, I had land, but now look at me. I'm just a peasant now in my
Right.
own home.
Right.
No,
I mean, it's you make a incredible point. And I think that, if you look at what Guam has done historically and what Guam is continuing to do as a people, as a government, we've done some righteous things. Like the Chamorro Land Trust program. And granted, I understand that the Chamorro Land Trust program is not perfect and it has not solved the problem. But the ability of Guam to institute this, right, to create it, even help it to survive a federal challenge. This case, there was a lawsuit on the Chamorro Land Trust program that was live at the same time as the Davis case. The Davis case we lost on the Davis case, but we won on the Chamorro Land Trust program case, which was ironic because the decision ultimately was made that there would be a settlement between the federal government and the government of Guam because we had a right to institute this program. And the agreement was on the definition. How did they define who was eligible to receive land from the Chamorro Land Trust program? Because we didn't build the land trust program to just give out land to anybody. We built the program in order to compensate and bring justice to those people who were displaced, who were forcibly made landless. Now, if you think about what we did as a territory,
I don't want to cut you off, but let me interject. I read the new law. I read the new law not thoroughly, but I read the new law by the Chamorro Land Trust, which is, by blood, how are you connected to land? So now you got to go and do your research on whether your ancestors where land were taken.
Right.
And I think that's a good thing. Good thing. It's bittersweet.
Right.
Because now you know that you have land, but now you know that it was condemned.
Right.
To me, it's bittersweet.
Right. No, I agree with you.
On my ancestors too, and it's bittersweet for me.
Right. And the point that I was trying to make is that if you look at what Guam has been able to do as a territory, I mean, we went heads up with the federal government on this issue. They went to town on us, you know what I mean, and went to court and everything. And so, for Guam to go heads up with the United States as a territory, how much stronger is Guam in that type of conflict as a freely associated nation, as a member of the Union, or as an independent nation? To me, it's like we've been doing an admirable job fighting with both hands tied behind our back. What is Guam made of when we're fully empowered as a sovereign nation? Because that's what that was one of the things that you brought up in the beginning, right? We're over here fighting for our sovereignty. Maybe we don't know right now what political status we want, but we do know that we want to be self-governing. We do know that we want to be sovereign. And so if we are empowered to make decisions for ourselves and determine what that kind of Guam looks like, then it's all about negotiation. Once we decide on a political status, and if we decide through that political status that we still want to have a relationship with the United States, then I would imagine that that's one of the issues that needs to be resolved. We need to come to the table with the federal government and solve forever what are we doing about this land situation. The history is clear, and even if you look at the new definition for eligibility for the Chamorro Land Trust program, it was recognized as a time-based political definition. And so essentially, in short, if you want to qualify for Chamorro Land Trust land, you have to prove that you or your ancestors had your family acquired by the federal government between a very specific window of time. And it was that time when all of the lands were being condemned, right? And so if you can show that you were one of those families that had your land condemned, like you said, right, it's kind of this bittersweet victory because you get that recognition and now you qualify for this land. Now, the hard part of obviously is that the Chamorro Land Trust program is not like, the government doesn't just give you the land and then you can just turn around and make your millions selling that land. It's a lease. It's a 99-year lease for $1 a year, and it's built as a land for the landless program. It's built so that people can build homes and have farms and sustain themselves.
True.
And so, and it's meant to solve this problem that you mentioned, right? Is that there's so many people on Guam who are landless, and that are indigenous Chamorros who are landless in their own homeland. And I think that's that to me is the biggest travesty.
Right.
Is that an indigenous population could be landless in their homeland, homeless in their homeland. When you think about it in that way, I think it's super problematic. If you look at the houseless population on Guam, over half of the houseless population is Chamorro. And people can go out there and argue, oh, you guys did it to yourselves, all you want, but I don't subscribe to that. I mean, yeah, there are definitely a number of people who choose to remain houseless, but I don't think that they're the majority of people that's what they want for themselves. And I think that if there was a solution, if there was a way to say, hey, we have a home for you, a house for you, land for you to farm and to feed yourself and your family, I have a hard time imagining that people just say, no, thanks, I'd rather live on the street and panhandle. So, when sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't think it is at all a done deal. It is a done deal if we just as a community agree that we just rather remain an unincorporated territory. Because that's what allows this situation to continue. That's what legitimizes this land condemnation and this glaring need for compensation. We just kind of let it go because, national security,
True. So what I'm trying to say is, hey, you guys, I'm sorry, Melvin, but I'm going to say out there, all you guys listening on Radio Land, this is the time. It's election time. You have to ask the top question.
I agree.
If you're gonna lie to me, then don't. I can take it. I rather for you to tell me the truth.
Right.
But don't sugarcoat it. Tell me the truth, and I can handle it.
I agree, and thank you, Senor Perez, for saying that. I always tell this to all my friends and all my family when they ask me, who are you voting for? I tell them it depends on who answers my question to my satisfaction. Right, and my question is always the same. All I want to know from every elected official that wants my vote is, what is your stance on decolonization and political self-determination? And is this a priority for you? And then I gauge their answer based on how well I think they understand it. Some of them might just say what I want to hear, like, oh, yeah, I think it's important. It's for the people to decide. But if you can't tell me how political status resolution is going to create solutions for the problems that we're facing now, then it means that you don't really understand it. And that's what I want. I want elected officials that understand the value, the significance, the importance, the potential, and the prospect of a full measure of self-government and how that can lead to genuine solutions to the problems that we face. I'm one of those people that believes wholeheartedly that every single problem that we face in our community today can be solved through political empowerment, through political status resolution.
And, like I said, hey, I hope our leaders are hearing us too, and they talk on the weekend and they change their mind on Monday. I hope it be something,
Yeah.
Stand up for what stand up, make a stronghold on your decision.
Right. I agree.
Well, anyways, thank you.
Seduas Masi, Senor Perez. Thank you for your call and thanks for your comments. Way to leave me off on a high note. I was already me and Reese was about to burn it down. We were already set off. We were upset. Got kind of rubbed the wrong way there. Thanks, Mr. Perez, for saving the show. Biba to you, Biba. We are at the top of the hour. We're about to start wrapping it up, but I did want to just remind folks about some of the exciting events that are happening around the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the Organic Act. If you didn't catch it earlier, on August 1st, that's this Friday, the festivities will start with a flag raising at the office of the governor at 8 a.m. They're going to be celebrating the creation of all the different government of Guam agencies and entities. There will be a naturalization ceremony at 9:30 a.m. at the session hall in the Guam Congress building. There will be several applications for naturalization and U.S. citizenship. A very exciting thing for a lot of people. There's a flag raising again at the Plaza de España at 12:45. The opening ceremony, which will feature the governor's proclamation and presentation at 1 p.m. at the Plaza de España, and the Hafa pledge subsequently after at 2:30. Shortly after that, at 3 p.m. from 3 to 5, there will be a critical conversations on the Organic Act featuring former Congressman Dr. Robert Underwood, Dr. Lisa Baza, and Polly Eric Forbes. That will take place at the Guam Congress Building in the Session Hall, 3 to 5 p.m. And then right afterward, actually during 4 to 8 p.m. is the Historic Revitalization Festival, which is taking place at the Plaza de España. Here there's going to be vendors and food trucks and presentations and all kinds of fun stuff. Fun for the family. So I encourage everyone to come out and celebrate and commemorate the signing of the Organic Act, but I also encourage everyone to come out and learn something, ask some questions. Me and my crew will be out there sharing some information around Guam's political status options and our history in pursuit of a full measure of self-government. Very exciting stuff. I just want to give a shout out again to the governor for making time to come on the show. I want to thank all of our listeners out there, especially those that called in and those that left comments or questions on the online platforms. But last but not least, I want to thank all of our movers and shakers, many who we have lost over the years. But there are a number of Tomoto leaders, revolutionary heroes that, had this outstanding vision of the prospect of a fully self-governing Guam. So thank you to all of the hands and the heads that helped get us to this point. Incredible work, very important work in establishing a local and organized self-government or local form of government on Guam. And thanks to everyone who is helping to maintain these institutions. So, and for the naysayers out there, if you're unhappy, get involved. That's the answer. And to echo Mr. Perez's sentiments, it is election season, so it's a good time for you to hold your leaders accountable. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the show. We will be back next week, Monday, 10 to noon, and we look forward to hearing from you then. Have a great day, everyone. Adios.
Once again, a challenge status quo here on Way, being brought to you by friends over there at Burger King. Don't forget to check them out. The barbecue brisket Whopper is available for you at BKU Rule, Hagåtña, Tumon, the Micro Mall, and the airport.
KGUM FM, Dedido. The talk of Guam is Wave 105 FM.
CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Progressive Insurance.
I'm Matt Piper. The United States and European Union have reached what President Trump describes as the biggest ever deal to resolve a transatlantic tariff standoff that threatened to explode into a full-blown trade war.
This didn't just start today. We had a meeting. I wasn't sure. I said 50-50. I think you probably felt the same thing. But this started months ago, this negotiation.
A baseline tariff of 15% will be levied on EU exports to the U.S. It will affect cars, says WWJ's Jeff Gilbert reports.